Welcome to another episode of 5 Random Boots. This is a show where I go through my entire collection, pick out 5 random boots, and then tell you about them. Randomly. Think of it as a football boot history lesson. Now, if you're a longtime viewer of this channel, then you know that this is technically not a new series. I've done quite a few 5 Random Boot episodes in the past that were very well received, but just as the boots are selected randomly, the series randomly went away. But it's back now and hopefully here to stay. So if you guys enjoy the 5 Random Boot series on this channel and want to see it continue, please support this video with a like. That lets me know that you want to see more. And if you don't want to miss out on future episodes of this series, be sure to hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you get notified when it goes live. When will the next episode be, you ask? Who knows? It's random. Random boot number 1 is the 2014 World Cup Adidas F50 Adizero Messi edition, which comes in a pretty cool looking box. It's the only reason why I'm showing you the box. Now, the 2014 World Cup was very important for the football boot industry in that it not only marked the beginning of some struggles for Adidas with their football boot releases, but also some huge success and some trend-setting stuff from Nike in the form of the Flyknit Upper Magista Opera 1 and Mercurial Superfly 4. However, Adidas had this, the F50 Adizero, which was basically the same boot for everybody wearing the F50 line except for one man, and that was Leo Messi, who basically got his own colorway variation of the boot that was part of what was called the Battle Pack. They haven't been cleaned since 2014, as you can see. The regular Battle Pack F50 worn by everyone else looked like this, but Messi's variation, as you can see, featured the same white base with the black design, but the design was more of kind of a cheetah print. I'm not exactly sure what you would call this, with this streak of blue going across the top in that same pattern along with the laces. There were also some personal touches for Messi exclusively, like his number 10 on the inside of the heel liner. There was a logo right there on the heel that is completely worn off, and of course his signature logo there on the back of the heel as well. Now, aside from the colorway, there was a physical difference between Messi's version of the F50 and everyone else's. A signature element of the 2014 F50 Adizero, at least the synthetic version, was the hybrid touch material, which I think has to go down as the best synthetic material we've ever seen on a speed boot from the Adidas brand. At least that's my personal opinion. And you'll notice Messi's variation features that hybrid touch synthetic across the entire upper. On regular colorways of the F50 Adizero, right around the heel area, it transitioned into what I remember being called a speed foil material. I could be wrong on that, but basically it was a plasticky type material with a textile base that looked a little bit different. It made for a visible seam on the upper as well, which you could argue looked better or worse, depending on what your opinion is. In all honesty, it makes no difference in regards to how the boot fits or feels, but it is a difference nonetheless. Overall though, the 2014 F50 Adizero, in my opinion, is the best speed boot ever made by the Adidas brand. The hybrid touch synthetic upper, the sprint frame sole plate, this particular stud pattern, which is probably the biggest deviation that we saw from Adidas since 2010 when they first introduced the original F50 Adizero. This also did feature the My Coach slot at the time, which is basically an empty slot in the left boot. It's filled in on the right boot, if you didn't know, where you can actually slot in a My Coach chip, which is something that you had to buy separately. It would track your stats. It wasn't very accurate. It never caught on in regards to popularity and was about $80 if I remember correctly, which I think is part of the reason why nobody ended up buying it. Either way, the overall package of the 2014 F50 not only makes this, in my opinion, the best F50 ever, but again, the best speed boot Adidas ever made. Random boot number 2 comes from Nike, and again I'm showing you the box because it's kind of unique, but it should be unique considering that random boot number 2 used to retail for $400 US. There's a label on the box if you don't believe me. So as you can see, these came in this fancy white box with gloss lettering on the surface, this really cool looking black stripe around the edge, but that's not actually the box. That's just a sleeve to protect the box, which reveals another box that's white in color with all of that writing now in black. Remove the lid and you'll find that on the underside of the lid, you're gonna find some tech specs of the boots themselves, not something too uncommon. They give you about 3 trees worth of paper. You unwrap your boots, pull them out of the box, but they're not that important yet, because what we're going to focus on is what's underneath all of this paper, something that Nike no longer includes, which you may be a little bit disappointed with now that you know this. But back in 2011, instead of string bags with the top end model, they used to include what I like to call the Nike lunchbox. At least that's what I think this looks like. And I only rate string bags, not lunchboxes. Sorry. As for the boots themselves, ladies and gentlemen, the Nike Mercurial Vapor Superfly 3 in the CR7 pinstripe colorway. I know what you're thinking. They don't look like anything special, but watch this. Pretty cool, right? It's not actually that cool. This seemingly magical effect is achieved by simply splitting the colorway in half. So you can see from the left side, you get the thicker stripes, and then from the right side, you get the thinner pinstripes. And in all honesty, I think that this side looks quite good. It's got a very clean look with the silver base and the thin pinstripes. And then this side, the silver base, the blue, the pink, it kind of just looks like a clown shoe in my opinion. You might have also heard me say that this is a CR7 colorway, which is unusual considering that you won't find any CR7 branding anywhere on the surface of the upper or the sole plate, which is super unusual for Nike. The only place where you'll find any note of Cristiano Ronaldo is on the insole, where you can see it reads, created to the exact specifications of Cristiano Ronaldo with the number 3. The reason for the number 3 is because back in the day, before we had the CR7 chapter series with these elaborate backstories explaining the inspiration for these unique colorways, all we got to identify one CR7 colorway to the next was a number, this being CR7's third ever signature colorway, coming after CR7 1 and CR7 2. But that's enough about the colorway, because we have to talk about how these boots perform considering the $400 price point, which is crazy to think, because honestly, one of the most common complaints that I see in the comment section of almost anything football boot related these days is how high-end boots are getting way too expensive. And realistically, right now in 2019, the most expensive high-end boot in a regular colorway, not counting anything limited edition, is about $275, which is not expensive. The current Superfly 6 Elite is a great example. 3 models later, the boot is $125 less expensive than it was in 2011, where Nike was seriously charging $400 for these. And get this, for $400, they're not very good at all. In fact, they're actually one of the worst high-end boots that I've personally ever worn. What made the Superfly 3 special was a couple of different things. It featured a Teijin synthetic upper backed by flywire cables that pretty much spanned the entire upper, running from the base of the sole directly into the lacing system, and it basically made this upper extremely stiff and rigid. Flywire as a concept is great, and it has evolved into something that I think is very well utilized by Nike. But back when it first was implemented on football boots, and this is technically the 3rd generation Superfly, the Superfly 1 being the first boot ever to implement flywire cables, technically along with the Vapor 5 if we're being really technical, those were all very uncomfortable boots, and the Superfly 3 is no different. With all of these flywire cables, along with the Teijin synthetic that is about 4 times as thick as the Teijin synthetic you're probably picturing in your head, this is legitimately one of the stiffest football boots that you can possibly wear. They feel more like work boots than they do football boots. Moving to the bottom, you'll find the carbon fiber sole plate, which became a signature element of the Nike Elite series dating back to 2010, and of course the 2 scent studs here in the forefoot area. Now the carbon fiber sole plate at this point I think was pretty streamlined and was not the downside of this boot in any way at all. But these scent studs, the idea behind them was that you had this conical stud through the middle of these bladed studs on either side that actually had the ability to retract and extend a couple of millimeters. It might have even been 1 millimeter. I'm not 100% sure. It probably says on the lid of the box. Either way, it just doesn't move. I remember getting a pair of these finally when I could afford them, when they were like 50 or 60% off, and getting them and trying to move the studs and thinking, is my pair broken? Because the studs don't move. But that's legitimately how this is. It's, as a marketing thing, kind of a cool concept, but in reality, hard to say that it actually did anything. Now, obviously the Superfly series has gone on to do bigger and better things. It's arguably the most popular in-demand top-end model currently available, but trust me when I say, prior to Superfly 4, the Superfly series was kind of terrible. They were important because of the tech that they introduced, but they certainly weren't great to play in. Random boot number 3 also came in a lunchbox. This is the Puma V106, but not just the regular V106, the V106 with the kangaroo leather upper. Now, going back 13 years to 2006, we have to consider what the football boot landscape was like, and at that point in time, kangaroo leather boots were still the thing to have. Most of the top-end models featured a kangaroo leather upper, but at that time as well, Nike was really turning some heads and getting some attention with the Mercurial Vapor series, which was now on the Mercurial Vapor 3 at that time, widely regarded as one of the best Mercurial Vapors ever, certainly one of the most important. So every brand outside from Nike was trying to basically copy them with the speed boot concept, which at that time was still a relatively new thing. Puma's answer was the V106, which was available in 2 different variations. The normal version, which typically featured this kind of wild grass pattern or whatever pattern they wanted to do, that had a textile-based upper. It was kind of weird. They actually did a remake of it back in 2016 at the 10-year anniversary, but the more uncommon variation was this one right here, which featured a kangaroo leather upper with this really cool laser-etched Puma branding on both the lateral and medial side. Now, in comparison to a Vapor 3, these are obviously a lot different. The big important thing I would say when you're talking about a speed boot is going to be the weight, and in a size 9.5, what size are these? These are a size 10. They weigh in at 8.2 ounces, which would have been about the same weight as a pair of Vapor 3s at the time. And keep in mind, this is the leather version that would have been a little bit heavier than the synthetic model. So you get this full kangaroo leather upper, which would not have been an option with the Vapor 3. So that was kind of Puma's angle with this, where they would offer a speed boot, but still give you the leather that a lot of people still viewed as the better type of material for a football boot in general. But they also put their own unique twist on it with its very interesting design that has this kind of extreme offset lacing system that's very shallow and honestly doesn't allow you to get a really tight fit on the foot, and that was kind of the one differentiating factor in comparison to a Vapor 3, especially considering this was the leather model, so it would stretch as well. And as a whole, this is a boot that had a reputation of just not being very durable. The sole separation at the toe was extremely common on these boots, whether you went for the leather or the synthetic version. Something that you could argue was ahead of its time, though, was the visible carbon fiber sole plate on the V106, which the Vapor 3 at the time, if you didn't know, if you look under the insole, there is actually a carbon fiber shank, essentially, that runs through the heel and midfoot area. But this actually had carbon fiber, however little there is, just enough to probably make it look like carbon fiber, running through the forefoot. Honestly, it just feels like a regular plastic sole plate, and the carbon fiber had no issues with cracking as far as I know, but it looks cool, and it's something that I don't think anyone did before this boot. Now that's a box. Random boot number 4 is another one from the Nike Elite series, and now that I'm actually reading the box through the camera, the box says Nike Football Plus. I have no idea what the plus stands for. Either way, these date back to 2010, and back at that time, while I'm not 100% sure because it's hard to look this stuff up, I want to say the retail price on these was about $350. Maybe it was $300, but I lean more towards the higher price. And for that money, again, you got this fancy box with this cool kind of warning design in the orange and gray. That's just a sleeve though, because on the underside you have the exact same thing, except now it's the actual box. Remove the lid, and on the underside you get nothing, unlike those Superfly 3s, which came out 1 year later, so they're a little bit different. But inside you got the Elite Series Nike T90 Laser 3. Technically the T90 Laser 3 Elite, but part of the Elite series. They also included a lunchbox. How are these so dusty? They were in a box. Now, 2010 was another very important year for football boots, not so much in regards to any tech introduced, but in regards to colorways. If you think about modern colorway releases, which we get a lot of these days, you never see one boot come out randomly in its own color. It's almost always part of a colorway pack, where there's a theme behind the pack and all the different boots follow that same theme. And in 2010, just in time for the World Cup, Nike put out this colorway that I'm sure if you saw the World Cup, you definitely remember. This kind of weird purpley silver color that transitions into orange at the heel with this kind of hazard warning graphic as the transitioning pattern. If you had a Nike boot in the World Cup, it had this colorway. Focusing specifically on the T90 Laser 3 Elite, it featured the upper from a T90 Laser 3 with one major modification and a carbon fiber sole plate, which was more or less a signature element of Nike's Elite series. The Elite series, for the most part, being a very clever way by Nike to charge more for their boots, mainly based around all the excitement of the carbon fiber sole plates that they had introduced on the Superfly series. Now, if you were willing to pay the extra $100 or $150, you could have a variation of that carbon fiber sole plate on your T90 Laser 3s, or CTR 360s, or Tiempos. Now, the T90 Laser 3 as a whole, I would argue, was probably the most aggressive design out of all the T90 models Nike ever put out, with the striking element in rubber being very, very bulky. And some people would argue that's a bad thing. I personally love the feel of striking the ball in these. It has these really cool fins hanging off the side. It has all of these extra pads that are kind of like a firmer rubber that are designed to kind of even out the striking surface as much as possible. I really feel like striking the ball in this boot specifically is very special. But what was unique about the Elite Series T90, specifically the one that came out for the World Cup, is that instead of the usual synthetic or the kangaroo leather that you could get on regular T90 Laser 3 models, this actually featured a Tasian synthetic upper around the rubberized striking element, which was basically the same material you could get on the Mercurial Vapor and the Superfly at the time. Not super thin if it's the same Tasian synthetic that you're expecting, but it was a cool concept, and the idea partially behind the Elite series as well, aside from just giving you a carbon fiber sole plate, was that the boots would be lighter than the standard models. And technically, the T90 Laser 3 Elite was 16% lighter than the regular one, which is not very much. And I can honestly tell you from personal experience, having had a pair of T90 Laser 3 Elites and regular T90 Laser 3s as a kid when it was a current model, because the T90 line was my personal favorite at that time. I was super excited to finally get a pair of Elites once they were on sale, but when I actually got them, I realized that I didn't actually like them quite as much as the regular model, mainly because the carbon fiber sole plate changed up the fit of the boot slightly, and my feet just fit better in the regular Laser 3 model. Which brings us to random boot number 5, the Adidas Predator Adipower. Now, if you've been following the football boot industry over the last couple of years, it was big news when Adidas decided to kill off the Predator line. They have since brought it back in the form of the Predator 18, now Predator 19, which are effectively the same thing. And as many people have argued, including myself, those aren't really Predators, they're more so just socks. The reason why I bring that up is because the main argument people make in defending the modern Predators, which are basically just socks, is that people don't want bulky old Predators anymore. They want something sleek, they want something lightweight. Case in point, the Predator Adipower is exactly that. It was the replacement for the Predator X, which I think is probably the Predator that killed the Predator line, or at least killed a lot of its momentum. But the Adipower was something completely different. No, it didn't have the big fold-over flap tongue, and no, it didn't have a kangaroo leather upper. In fact, the leather quality is the one arguably disappointing element of this particular boot, but it did include the rubberized striking element, a very good one at that. The boot as a whole, I think, is very attractive, certainly more attractive than the Predator X that it replaced, and kind of running on the hype of the 2010 F50 Adizero that introduced their sprint frame sole plate. The Adipower Predator also introduced a sprint frame, making it the lightest Predator of all time, but still maintaining the classic Predator stud pattern, which, by the way, Adidas, can we get this back sometime? In a size 9 US, the Adipower Predator weighs in at 7.8 ounces, which is on par with just about any top-end model out there these days, and by the way, lighter than the current top-end Predators. Adidas, if you're watching, I know I'm just some random guy, you probably don't care about my opinion, but if you were to give us a modern-day Predator that was something like the Adipower, I realize leather is not where it's at anymore, but could you imagine something like the Adipower with a knitted-based upper? I don't see how that wouldn't sell. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is it for this episode of 5 Random Boots. If you enjoyed the video and want to see more like this, please support it with a like. And if you're watching this video and aren't subscribed to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. Please hit the little bell notification so you get notified when the next new video goes live. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them down below in the comments, and I'll do my best to get an answer out to you as soon as I possibly can. If you enjoyed this type of information, maybe go and check out the Boot Nerds podcast that I do with J Mike from Unisport. I'll leave a little pop-up on screen to that channel. We post a new podcast every single week, answering a bunch of your questions, as well as talking about all of the latest football boot news. So go and subscribe to that channel if you haven't already. All my social media information is also linked down below, so be sure to go ahead and check that out. And other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.